Dear colleagues, we are now 12:01 or 13:01 or 10:01, and I would like to invite us all to gradually start our session today. So thank you very much all participants from numerous countries for joining this peer learning webinar. It is the 10th ACQF peer learning webinar. You are most welcome. And in a way, we could say that we reached a very interesting and worth celebration milestone. This is the 10th already webinar. So your participation, your interest, your contributions are very valuable and highly appreciated, especially bearing in mind that we are all in a difficult context, very trying times for all countries. So the struggle with the pandemic has been an individual and global national struggle everywhere. And we are really very grateful for your participation. Let me share a very just brief information before I pass the floor to my colleague, Nicholas Omar, representing the African Union Commission, for the opening remarks. So please, colleagues, we will have, of course, to use the translation channel because we have one presentation not in English, so in Portuguese. It will be the first one. So I'd like to invite you, please, to immediately bear in mind that you will need to select your preferred language for the first presentation. Please keep your camera on if you like, it's very appreciated, but keep the sound off if you are not speaking. That is always very, very useful. And please, if you did not give consent to record the meeting, could you please keep the camera off? So I immediately then pass the floor to Nicholas Omar from the African Union Commission, Department Education, Science and Technology, Education Division. Nicholas, please, for the welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eduarda, and thank you, colleagues, for finding time to join us at this engagement. Distinguished experts, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard, my name is Nicholas Omar. I am with the Education, Science and Technology and Innovation Department of the African Union Commission. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. First, Eduardo, please confirm if you can hear me.
We can hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you. It is indeed quite an honor and a great pleasure to, on behalf of the African Union Commission, heartily welcome you all to this 10th peer learning webinar with a focus on TVET reforms and national qualification framework implementation. And as Eduarda has just mentioned earlier, it is quite a great milestone for us at the African Union and for which we are very proud, for we have come a long way. And I believe that all of us have benefited quite a great deal from the experience sharing and learning that we have had since we started these webinars last year. Allow me to once again appreciate the efforts of our technical partners on this project, the European Training Foundation, and the entire team, including you colleagues who are with us today, for putting together this webinar and for finding time to join us. Your efforts are indeed very much appreciated. This event is important as it gives us an opportunity as participants to gain insights into the African National Qualification Framework experiences on qualifications, databases, and information systems. Today it will be from South Africa and Kenya, and on recognition of qualifications from Angola. We therefore also get the opportunity to learn from the experiences of these countries. We register our sincere appreciation to these countries for accepting to share with us their journey on these themes that are very critical facets of the capacity development program as we develop the African Continental Qualification Framework. Other components of the capacity building program to be undertaken later in the year, as you may be well aware, are the African Continental Qualification Framework Conference and training program on qualifications and qualification frameworks. We welcome you also to prepare to join us in all these. Through the capacity building programs, we seek to empower the key stakeholders in the development and effective use of qualification frameworks as a means of reforming and managing qualification systems. Ultimately, the sustainability and continuity of this journey that we started together last year will depend on our commitment and understanding of qualification frameworks and systems, and eventually lead to a continental network of trained experts able to support countries in developing and improving their national qualification frameworks initiatives. Finally, we still have other milestones to cover in this journey, including finalization of the African Continental Qualification website and the development of the policy document and action plan. The African Union is part of this journey and also counts on your support in making this journey successful. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Eduarda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asante-san and Nicholas, for setting the scene and for reminding us all about the important milestones of this very important and project for African integration as a whole. I'm very, very pleased to be part of this team and to work together with you, Nicholas, and colleagues. So we have now a few minutes still for in this introductory session, and I will very quickly go through some of the points. Namely the agenda, a brief introduction on the African experiences shared today and our speakers. And I will not take much time on the ACQF Capacity Development Program, since Nicholas just reminded us about this aspect. So on the agenda, so we have basically today three main substantive sessions, as always. The first session will have 30 minutes, and then the next two sessions have 45 minutes each. And in each of the sessions, 3 and 4, we have two cases. This means that we will have to manage time in a very efficient manner, and I already thank in advance our speakers for taking into consideration this element, time management. And naturally, we always save some time for questions and answers in the last part of our agendas. So we know that today we are going to have a first session dedicated to conceptual and policy discussion on national qualifications frameworks. Then from that conceptual and policy discussion, in which we will hear and we will have the opportunity to think about national qualifications frameworks as part of a system, not working in isolation. Then we will move and link to another important element, particularly in our days of digitalization, automation, data era, an era of data. And it will be dedicated to technology at service of qualifications, learners and users, with focus on registers of qualifications, national qualifications frameworks, and databases, learners records databases. So we will have here two very interesting cases, South Africa, ACQF, and Kenya National Qualifications Authority. Thank you very much in advance for your generous sharing of this information, knowledge and experience. I think this will be a very innovative, let's say, session. And then we will link with another element, very important, which is recognition of learning, recognition and verification of qualifications. And here we have also two cases. And again, thank you, colleagues, for joining and for sharing time and knowledge with us all. And the two cases are the African Qualifications Verification Network, Aqvn, and the case of Angola, so of the National Institute for Evaluation, Accreditation, and Recognition of Higher Education Studies. A few words about our speakers. They are really the fundamental goal of these webinars, of this creation of common knowledge for all African countries. And as I always think, also an element of pride for the African experiences that are available and can be further used by other countries, mutual learning. So for the first session, with the topic NQFs do not work in isolation, a systemic view, we will have the pleasure to hear from Mr. Olavo Correia. Mr. Olavo Correia is a citizen of Cape Verde, and he is currently a key expert on qualifications, RPL, qualifications framework of the project REDFOP in Angola. He has a very long-standing experience in developing national qualifications frameworks in the context of national qualification systems, notably in Cape Verde and Angola. Then for the third session, Management Information Systems of National Qualifications Frameworks, we will have with us the CEO of the South African Qualifications Authority, Dr. Julie Reddy, and also the senior researcher of South African Qualifications Authority, Mrs. Tola Akindolani. Thank you so much for your very well thought through presentation. Thank you. I want to say, of course, that ACQF plays also a very important role as lead of the implementation program called Alignment of the South African Development Community Qualifications Framework. Then in the same session, the second case will be shared, discussed by Kenyan National Qualifications Authority, notably by the CEO, Dr. Eusebio Mukwana. Thank you so much. Please switch off your microphone. Thank you, thank you. And then he will be, of course, the presentation will actually be done by Dr. Vincent Kuch, who is the head of Information Technology Department of the Kenyan National Qualifications Authority. Thank you in advance. This will be a very innovative presentation, I think. And then in the last session, recognition and verification of qualifications, the two cases, let me welcome once again our colleague, Mrs. Miriam Chiaba, who is the CEO of Zambia Qualifications Authority. And she's also the chair of the African Qualifications Verification Network, and as well a very active person and active member of the TCCA of the SADC Qualifications Framework, notably leading in the implementation program called Advocacy. And then our last speaker will be Dr. Maria Madalena Gil. She is the Deputy Director of INARES. As I said already earlier, it is the National Institute for Evaluation, Accreditation, and Recognition of Higher Education Studies. She's also a member of the TCCA of the SADC Qualifications Framework as a country representative for the higher education sector. I will not take your time with this usual contextualization that we do, because Nicholas already kindly did it. So I would like just to recall that these peer learning webinars are part of the strategy of the project developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework, ACQF. This is work started in September 2019, will go on until more or less end 2022, so another one year ahead of us to complete this first important milestone. And the capacity development program has been growing in importance. There will be a website soon, and also as well as a learning management system to support and strengthen the accessibility and the quality of the capacity development program. Very quickly, Nicholas also reminded us that the capacity development program is a combination of various modalities, going from peer learning to training, conferences, and support to countries. And I'd like just to recall that in 2020, we had already the first 7 peer learning webinars. It was that very difficult and hard period of the first waves of the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. And we learned about 14 cases of African qualifications frameworks, notably, of course, most of them national qualifications frameworks, but also 2 regional qualifications frameworks. And you can see on the screen all the countries that have been sharing their concrete experience. And we again thank you. We have really a very useful knowledge base composed of all these presentations and video recordings available for anyone who wants to learn more in detail about these experiences. And from other regions and continents, we also had 8 cases shared in 2020. So a total of 22 cases of national and regional qualifications frameworks. And now in 2021, we are diversifying a little bit the thematic emphasis of these peer learning webinars. They are all focused on African experiences, but they are tackling various important themes. Of course, national qualifications frameworks, not only those that are already experienced and well established, as we had the case of Seychelles already and Namibia, it was in June, but also new developments, countries that are now developing further important elements, important policies, legislation, will also come and share their novelties. Then we had also good focus on quality assurance frameworks. We had in the last webinar the 2 important cases, CAMES and Senegal, ANAQ-SUP. Recognition of learning and qualifications. We had the first very interesting presentation on RPL Kenya in June, and today we have Aqvn in Angola. Then today we have this very important element, which is management information systems, technology at service of national qualifications frameworks. And then other thematic, very important aspects of the capacity development program include learning outcomes approaches. So NQF as national as systems, and it's a presentation we have today immediately after, and school curriculum. So a bit later in October, we will have the opportunity to learn the findings, main recommendations of the school curriculum, African school curriculum survey that is going to be started next week. This will be also a very interesting session. I'd like to complete this introductory session by just informing and reminding that in the meanwhile, the team of the ACQF development project has been drafting thematic briefs related with all the themes that you have outlined on the screen. And 6 of these thematic briefs, very nicely designed, by the way, are already accessible. There are also 2 case studies. So you are most welcome to please just look up either in the web page of this webinar. All these 6 thematic briefs are uploaded there, or through the website of the African Union Development AUDA NEPAD. So you can also have access to these thematic briefs in a dedicated resource space. And without further I immediately pass the floor to our colleague Olavo Correia for his presentation, a substantive presentation dedicated to national qualifications frameworks. They do not work in isolation, a systemic view. Olavo, if you would like, you can share your screen. Olavo, já pode partilhar o seu ecrã. Muito obrigada.
Mr. Olavo, you can now share your screen. Thank you.
I hope Olavo is connected still. Sometimes there are some difficulties with connectivity. Okay, excellent, Olavo. Thank you. Colleagues, please, you need to select your preferred interpretation channel, French or English, because our colleague Olavo will speak in Portuguese. Thank you.
Alô, bom dia, Eduarda. Estão a ver-me bem?
Sim, estamos a ver bem.
Good morning, Eduarda. Do you see and hear me very well? If you want to do slideshow, you may do so. But if you don't wish so, you can leave it the way it is. You have about 25 minutes to deliver your presentation.
Ok, então, muito obrigado. Gostaria...
Thank you very much.
Estou aqui com um pequeno problema. Estou com
I have small problems. I'm having a problem of return of the sound, but I'll try to avoid.
Espero bem que me entendam. Portanto, gostaria de vos cumprimentar a todos os colegas de vários
Good morning to all colleagues from various countries. I really appreciate your initiative.
Enfim, nos dar a oportunidade de partilhar.
Of giving us opportunity to share a little bit our work, our day-to-day work about the national qualification systems.
Espero bem que a minha apresentação esteja visível.
I hope that my presentation is clear and you can see it very well on the screen, but I think we may proceed. If you wish, I may share the screen for you.
Se não, vê-se bem a apresentação, Olavo, podes continuar.
But the presentation is quite clear. You can proceed.
Ok, então vamos continuar com
So let us proceed with the presentation as I propose. The challenge here is to try to understand the national qualification framework in a systemic view. In a systemic view, we would like to understand that it is our challenge to try to understand that the national qualification framework
execuível, de modo
is very less manageable, as we understand that the national qualification framework, it makes sense if it's aligned within a national qualification system, a unique system.
Estamos aqui com problemas.
We are facing some challenges.
Estamos aqui com um problema.
We are facing challenges, encountering challenges. Do you understand,
Não tem nenhum feedback.
Eduarda? I do not have any feedback, but we can hear you very well, Ms. Olaf.
Ok. Então, continuando, eu dizia.
So, continuing, I was saying that according to the guidance of ILO, which should not be different, acknowledge education, training, and permanent learning as a very important contribution. ILO proposed to the member country to promote in a certain way interests of the people, of the companies, of the company, and of the society as whole. This is the very first aspect. The second aspect, ILO proposed to member countries that specifically towards the fundamental importance, which means to reach the employment. So that means eradication of the poverty, social inclusion, and sustainable economic growth, that the country should rethink on their way of operating. So these ideas of ILO, they are in a resolution of ILO from which is in old before the qualification framework, which is the recommendation about the development of human resources, education, training, and permanent learning. So we're speaking about a recommendation 195 of June of 2004. What does this recommendation state? What can be interesting for the dialogue of today? In point number 5, in line E, the recommendation says that the state member should, in a certain way, try to develop a national milestone of qualification which facilitates the permanent learning of people, which facilitates permanent learning, which assists the company and the agents of the allocation of people to conciliate the demands with the offer of competence or supply of competence. ILO recommend the state member to seek a way of making balance or of demand and also the offer of competence. And in the other side, these also should guide people. This is very important to guide people in their options of training and also their training path, and also strengthen their professional competency, the competence, and also the experience which were gained previously. The main question now is, what should this mean? What should this national milestone mean? Or a deep question should be, what is a national milestone of qualification? We understand as a national milestone that is a national framework of qualification. So the question is this national framework, does it work on its own? But we think that no, because there is a set of other things which are necessary so that this can work. This cannot work isolatedly. The framework does not work isolatedly. If we think on the African continent or the African reality, we have a document here which is very important for Africa, which is called the CESA 25, which is a continental strategy of education of 2015-2016, which requests the state members of African Union to create national qualification framework and regional framework in order to facilitate the establishment of multiple ways for acquisition of competence as well as for the mobility. It is very important, this challenge, which is brought by CESA 25, if we can concentrate the creation of multiple ways for acquisition of competence. So this is something that we're going to see further.
Várias formas e em vários contextos. Contextos que podem ser formais, podem ser informais e podem também ser não.
Acquisition of competences happens in different ways. That can be formal and informal. So this is what we can discuss later on. So in terms of the African continent, the CESA document is one that leads us to discussing about the national qualification systems, basically in the sense of having NQFs as well that are national as well as regional qualification systems or frameworks. Another document that is important at the level of the African Union is the document that establishes the African Continental Free Trade Area. This is a document that, if we look at the first overall goal of this document, we see that the main objective is to create a single market of goods and services to facilitate the free movement of people in order to deepen economic integration in the African continent. So we need to emphasize this expression, movement of people. Movement of people means that we need to foster the circulation of people. However, we know that mobility and circulation of people from one place to another does not make sense if the skills of those people are not recognized for wherever they travel. It means that it doesn't make sense for someone, for example, to travel from Mozambique and work in South Africa as a physician if he does not have his skills recognized in South Africa. It doesn't also make sense if an engineer from Zambia goes, for example, to Mauritius to work, but his skills are not recognized. We need to create conditions so that those skills are recognized in other countries. Recognizing those competences facilitate the circulation of persons and fosters mobility. This main objective that establishes the African Continental Free Trade Area is extremely relevant in the context of establishing national qualification frameworks and systems. Lastly, I also want to bring the document that has greater relevance for the African continent, which is the Agenda 2063, which leitmotif is the Africa that we want, the Africa that we all want. In my opinion, it will be more comfortable to say that we should take us, not just Africa we want. We need to emphasize in Portuguese, we want to build. Agenda 4063 also looks at the strengthening of vocational learning of high quality in Africa by promoting different skills and employability, as well as promoting greater liaisons between the industry and its alignment to the labor markets with the purpose of improving the profile of skills, the employability, and entrepreneurship, specifically for young people and women. This part that is underlined, highlighted actually. A highlighted part on promoting greater liaisons with the industry and aligning the labor markets also leads us to question about the national qualification systems and looks at the need for us to have NQFs. The main and the pressing question that we could raise is how can all this be implemented? How can I serve the productive sector by creating linkages with the industry and aligning it with the labor markets? How can we develop skills and qualifications that are adjusted to the profiles of skills? How can we foster mobility for persons to circulate? These are the three main questions that, if we look at the highlighted part, we propose as a challenge, promoting greater liaisons with the industry and alignment with the labor markets with the purpose of improving skills. So how can we do that? By linking the productive sector and the industry and aligning it with the labor market by developing adjusted skills. We also need to foster mobility for people to move around. So how can we carry out this purpose? We can do that in different manners. There is room for many insights. We need to have a broader perspective in terms of initiatives and ideas that can be called to our rescue. We can have ideas, conceptions, and so on for the whole set of opportunities that we can propose. We have the national qualification systems. As long as we understand that the national qualification systems includes all the aspects in the activities of the country that lead to the recognition of the education. These systems include means to develop and put into practice the national or regional policy on qualifications. These systems normally have institutional provisions. They also propose quality assurance procedures, as well as for assessment and certification, and other mechanisms that link education and training to the labor market and the civil society. Thus, I defend that there are different insights that can lead to the implementation of the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. One of the insights is to have a national qualifications system. Why do I say so? With the NQS, it has a different and important characteristic. Through this system, we can explicitly have a qualification framework. And to summarize this theory that I've just brought forward, we can say the following. Having an NQS that can be defined as a set of activities linked to the recognition of the learning process and other mechanisms that coordinate or link the education and vocational training to the labor market. And an NQS has a whole set of elements that have been identified. And it's precisely the work done whereby we can give significance to the NQS. In a nutshell, we can say that building an NQS is a process of dialogue above all. The NQS cannot be unilateral. It's not something that cannot be created simply by a law, by having an idea. No, that's not the case. It has to be shared. And based on my experience, I defend, and what I've seen from my own experience, what I've observed and I've lived, I know that to create an NQS is mainly a process of dialogue.
De forma muito resumida, ver quais são as fases da construção desse diálogo.
Briefly, what are the phases to build this dialogue? The first phase to build the dialogue is to mobilize partners and stakeholders. In other words, through what we can call social dialogue. Social dialogue is a term that normally describes the participation of employees, employers, and governments in decision-making processes related to employment and job creation. Social dialogue includes all sorts of negotiations, consultation, and exchange of information between the representatives of these different actors based on their common interests. For example, economic policies, labor policies, and social policies. So through social dialogue, we can mobilize key stakeholders. After mobilizing and identifying all key stakeholders needed to establish an NQS, we move to the following phase, which is to disseminate concepts and good practices, policies, everything that we have learned as good or needed for an NQS. Fortunately, nowadays, an NQS has been brought on board in the social dialogue. There are many experiences, and many countries have created and developed different NQSs. So those countries that are in the pathway of establishing an NQS can learn from experiences of others. This learning process can be done in different ways, by having workshops, seminars, meetings, sharing documentation, case studies. There are different means of learning that we can disseminate concepts and good practices around. Good practices on NQS and NQF. Then, when we build within the country critical mass that can discuss about establishing a system, an NQS system, we move to the last phase, which is to formulate proposals, raise the awareness about those proposals. Since proposals are created, then they are discussed, and finally they are finalized and submitted for approval by the authorities. So for approval by the authorities, not to create any controversy, we need to follow and respect these phases of first formulating proposals, raising the awareness of proposals, finalizing proposals, and submitting those proposals. My dear friends, this can only be done through social dialogue and mobilizing key stakeholders. This is paramount to build a good NQS. As I've just said, the NQS has a whole set of key elements, and some are more important than others. So when we establish an NQS, we should have as key elements. First, we need to define the scope of the system, what system we envisage, Then we define the goals or objectives that we aim to achieve with the system. The system should also have certain principles. For example, the principle of free access and equity and equality of opportunities between the different beneficiaries. This is important to define within the system. The system should also define those key and direct and important stakeholders that we can even say that they are part of the task force, they are part of the leading stakeholders, they should be identified. And finally, we have as key element the need to have a model of coordination or governance. Thus, these are the key elements of national qualification system.
Eu creio que nós não teremos muito tempo.
I think that we don't have much time to delve deeper into those 5 key elements. However, this is what I can broadly talk about the scope of the system. The NQS can have a broader scope as well as a restricted scope. We have some systems that have restricted scopes and others have broader ones that include other subsystems of learning, from vocational learning until higher education. So the scope of the system should cover all the structures and set of instruments that are needed to promote, develop, and integrate the different vocational learning opportunities. The scope of the system cannot also set aside that within the national catalog of professional qualifications and validation and certification of skills, those 2 are key elements when we talk about the scope of the system that we aim to build, establish. When we look at objectives or goals, there are some assumptions that we need to consider to guide such objectives. First objective of the NQS should be intrinsically linked to the scope of the system. It means that the objective of the system depends if the scope is broad or scope. The objectives of the system should also be clear and should target the coordination and integration of the different national education systems and the vocational system. These 3 points are key for us to define our objectives for the national qualification system, wherever we are. The objectives should be intrinsically linked to the system that can be broad or restricted. The objectives have to be clear. And finally, those objectives should harmonize and integrate the national education and qualification and vocational learning systems. So, Lav, you only have 5 minutes, so I don't have enough time. Let me see how I can run through the principles. There's a principle of alignment and fitness of the training opportunities. We need to also, in vocational learning, we need to look at the efficiency and efficacy of the actions, the mobility and opportunities of employees, and the promotion of qualification as a key factor for social and economic development of human resources. This is a chart that shows the different instruments that we can have in a national qualification system. When we refer to the NQS, we look at the National Catalog of Qualifications, we look at the referrals of training, certification, of training entities, referral to qualifications, instruments of competences, no matter how they were acquired. So these are the main instruments that we have.
Eu vou saltar essa parte sobre
I'll just jump to slide. However, I need to inform that we need to have, as key stakeholders, we need to have a coordinating entity. We need to have vocational learning and secondary education, vocational learning institutions. We should also include all key stakeholders, including private and public institutions that undertake vocational learning, educational training. This is very important when we look at an NQS. On coordination, we see that normally the systems have steering models that vary from coordination units. For example, Cape Verde, we also have national qualification agencies, such as in Portugal. In Ireland or Egypt, they have quality assurance agencies. In Morocco and Tunisia, they have ministerial departments. Nigeria has TVET agencies. And in the SADC region, we have the National Qualification Authority. Regardless of any denomination that you may give to the National Qualification governing body, what matters is that this governing body should have included representation from the Ministry of Education, especially from the vocational learning, as well as the Ministry of Labor, especially on vocational training. The second point on the coordination of the system is that they should be given room to enable the participation of the key stakeholders from the employers and the employees.
Nós vamos saltar toda essa parte.
We have to run through these slides just to give an example on how Africa is positioned within the NQSs. There are countries that don't have any NQSs. There are other countries that are started the roadmap, and other countries have very consolidated systems. And for example, Cape Verde is one of the 3 countries, together with South Africa and Mauritius, that have reached level 5 of advanced implementation of NQSs. We don't have much time. Some challenges that I would like to raise, share with you on this dialogue. First, a system is a set of different parts. It means principles that can be true or false, but a system includes different parts that come together to lead to doctrinal part. So they are independent and they complement each other. So a national qualification system is a set of activities leading to the recognition of different learning systems and other mechanisms that coordinate education and vocational training. So they are interdependent and they complement each other. The challenge is an NQS is a component. The NQF is a component or instrument of the NQS. The NQF is not the system. So an NQF isolated from the NQS does not really make sense. It can actually be forgotten. An NQF is an important input to define the national catalog of qualifications, which is another element of the NQS. Finally, we need to emphasize the need to enable dialogue between partners and key stakeholders on having a common understanding on NQSs. From dialogues, we can give birth to NQSs to serve first the people and then the economies. Therefore, let us remember these words. Dialogue gives birth to two systems, either bad or good, but they should serve the people and the economy. So, Eduarda, I think that my time has run out. Should I wait in if there are questions? If there are questions, I'm available to answer based on my knowledge. Thank you, Olavo, for this question and for bringing background on the NQS in relation to the ecosystem or the overall system of qualifications. This was actually broader than we discuss in countries. Thank you very much for that. If you want, you can actually stop your sharing your presentation, give floor to others.
For this presentation, in which he has defended this idea of national qualifications frameworks do not work in isolation. They need to be attached to the system, an ecosystem. They have to work in complementarity as added value elements to the other pillars, components, elements of the
Alors, chers collègues, je voulais dire que il a également souligné le problème des concepts communs et des objectifs communs, ainsi que la qualification. Ça, c'était des points très fondamentaux. J'aimerais dire
French and also in English, and it is, of course, in the web page of the of our webinar. So now I would like then to introduce the next session, and I think the next session will be a very good, will be well connected with the first one. And in the next session, we will look into the experiences, the cases of South Africa and Kenya related with management information systems of national qualifications frameworks, registers of qualifications and learners databases. I'd like immediately to invite then our colleagues from SAQA, South African Qualifications Authority, Dr. Julie Reddy, and Mrs. Tola Akindolani. Thank you. The floor is yours. You can share your presentation. Thank you.
Eduarda, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, and we can see the presentation very well as well. Thank you.
Okay, Tola will be sharing that. Good day, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to share the South African experience in constructing and managing a national qualifications framework management information system. We look forward to this engagement with you. In terms of what we will be talking to, we want to premise it within the work that the South African Qualifications Authority, SAQA, does as the custodian of the South African National Qualifications Framework. We will then look at key aspects of the South African National Qualifications Framework Management Information System, and then we will look at highlights, challenges, and lessons learned. So just to give you a broad overview, our presentation is premised on the view that an NQF management information system must be guided and informed by the information needs of a country's education, national education and training system. And in South Africa, that is with our South African National Qualifications Framework. So I'm going to do a very high-level overview of the regulatory and system arrangements in which our national NQF management information system is located. Just to let you know that our what we first called the National Learners Records Database was established over 20 years ago in 1999. SAQA celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. We're very proud of that. It's been a tough year, but we're still standing. And after it established the National Qualifications Framework in about 1998, implemented 1999, it had a similar, simultaneous parallel National Learners Records Database, which has evolved over the years. So what is SAQA? SAQA is an authority, a statutory body, which was established in 1995 as one of the first transformative acts of the new democratic government, and it continues under the National Qualifications Framework Act of 2008. So the Act mandates SAQA to develop and implement, advance the objectives, and coordinates 3 sub-frameworks of a national qualifications framework for our country. We're involved in a number of things. You will see the registration of qualifications, the management of a management information system. It started as a learner records achievement database. Collaboration is a big part, as the first speaker said. It is very important to make sure you bring people along in transforming and changing the system and introducing new constructs and systems. We do foreign qualification evaluation and recognition. We recognize professional bodies and register their professional designations, which are licensed to practice in our management information system. We record that. We verify national qualifications in the promotion of genuine qualifications, and we conduct research. Our NQF is a single integrated system. It's an aspirational model for the classification, coordination, registration, publication, and articulation of quality assured national qualifications. And it has to be approved by our minister, who currently is known as the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. It used to be the Minister of Higher Education and Training. That's the HET there. Next slide. So just very quickly to say that the NQF is a social construct. And as was said by the previous speaker, it must be premised on active participation and social dialogue, as Mr. Pereira said. It is in service to its people. It requires ongoing intellectual scrutiny, adequate resources, all of which is guided by a strong transformational agenda. It's a comprehensive system. It has a register of qualifications, which is the technical aspects of the NQF. And very importantly, it's a framework for communication, collaboration, and coordination in the service of the education and training system and the people who live in the country that it serves. So the mandate of the NQF in terms of its management information system and data management, what the Act says is that SAQA, with respect to records of education and training, and must maintain a national learners records database management information system that comprises registers of national qualifications and part qualifications, learner achievements, detail of accredited providers offering the registered qualifications, recognized professional bodies, registered professional designations, other information, for example, a register of foreign qualifications compared and pegged against national qualifications registered on our South African NQF. And more recently, there was an amendment to our Act, which is yet to be actioned because it needs to be proclaimed by our president. And understandably, his attention has been taken with the national pandemic and other pressing matters in our country. But this requires us to establish and maintain a register of misrepresented qualifications, which is gathered by the evidence that we gather as South Africa in our functions, and to establish a register of fraudulent qualifications or part qualifications. I will now hand, I'm getting a bit confused, excuse me. In order to do our work, we need to work with our infrastructure partners, and we have 3 quality councils who are the quality assurers, which is the Council for Higher Education, the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, and the Council for General and Further Education and Training. Next thing. You can move to the next slide. Okay, we have a 10-level NQF, but with regards to information matters, the 3 quality councils are responsible for maintaining a database of learner achievements and related matters, and to submit that data to SAQA for recording on our management information system. Until now, SAQA has been performing this function for 2 of the 3 quality councils, but since this year, we have handed over the data inputting and the data loading function, and we're moving into a more strategic data analytics function, which my colleague Tola will tell you more about as she comes in to do the presentation. SAQA's role is to maintain the database and to submit such data these QCs must then submit this data to meet our requirements in terms of data loading and what needs to be captured. Next slide. So I'll hand over now to Amatola Akindolani. She's a senior researcher at SAQA, and she'll take you through the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie, and hello, everyone. In this section, I will touch on some of the aspects of the South African NQF management information systems, as well as highlights and challenges that we've experienced in the process of managing these systems. Right. The NQF MIS is a system that consists of various databases, and I'll just linger on this diagram on the top right-hand corner of my slide for a bit. In its current form, it is referred to as the National Learners Records Database, and it contains information on registered qualifications and part qualifications, professional bodies and professional designations, and other information provided for by the Nqf Act of 2008. Some of the other databases that make up, or registers that make up the Nqf MIS, and Julie has already touched on the registers of misrepresented and fraudulent qualifications. Some of them include the verifications database, and this is where the outcomes of SAQA's verification service are recorded. Another database that makes up the system is the foreign qualifications database, which contains details of SAQA's foreign qualifications evaluation service, and includes data or information on all learners that have come into South Africa to either seek work or further study. As Julie has mentioned, SAQA is mandated by law to keep, manage, and report on these databases and registers so that we as a country can monitor the progress we've made towards implementing the NQF. The NLRD itself was developed in 1999 and is widely considered the most comprehensive register of national achievements and the largest NQF IMS or MIS on the continent. Now, what are we able to do with this information on the database? Julie has spoken about the fact that there's a definite shift towards using that information more strategically. Currently, we provide analysis and reports that guide policy and decision-making at various levels of government. Some aspects of the database, especially around the qualifications, are available to the public, to members of the public on SAQA's website, and they can use this information for the verification of achievement or work or study purposes. SAQA reports on its work and all other NQF related matters to the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation on an annual basis. And like Julie had mentioned, we also collaborate with other stakeholders to produce progress reports as part of our accountability requirements. On this slide, I've just tried to show how information moves or flows to the NLRD. The NLRD receives data from a couple of sources. The information on the registration of qualifications and part qualifications is received from SAQA's own registration and recognition unit, and they then submit this information to be recorded on the NLRD. Then we have the 3 quality councils that Julie has briefly mentioned. They submit information on learners and achievements, providers, and all other associated information. They submit this information to the NLRD. Then information on professional bodies and their designations and designates are submitted by the professional bodies. I'd just like to make a distinction here to say the 3 quality councils, each in charge of the sub-frameworks, do submit information, but in addition, we've got the Department of Higher Education and Training that submits records on public higher education, while the Quality Council for Higher Education submits information on private institutions. That's just a little distinction here, but these are the sources for the NLRD. The data submission process is guided by strict data loading requirements, and timing of submissions is included in guidelines to ensure consistency. On this slide, I show a snapshot of the content of what we currently have. As of the 30th of June 2021, the NLRD has records of over 20 million people. And these 20 million people have contributed over 61 million records of learner achievements to the NLRD. There is the qualifications register, which contains over 11,000 registered qualifications. And these qualification register also includes details such as, what NQF sub-framework the qualification belongs to, the NQF level, the ID and the title, articulation options, recognition of prior learning options, and other fields, other related fields. In terms of professional bodies, there are 106 recognized professional bodies that have 395 designations and over 1 million designated members. There are also over 6,000 providers that are recorded on this database. Now, with this rich data and detailed information, SAQA is able to produce various reports and analysis at various levels that provide information. In terms of our in-house analysis, SAQA has provided or has produced 6 trends reports that look at the information on the NLRD and share them with the public. The trends reports, the first trends report was published in 2002, and we've just recently produced the 6th trends report. And this graph is one of the graphs that we replicate in the report. For the 6th trends report, we have looked at trends in achievement for a 10-year period from 2009 to 2008. And in the report itself, we can further disaggregate this information into NQF levels and the different qualification types, as well as different fields and area of specialization, because that information is available. Just by the side, reports are available. If you want them by request, we're happy to share those. Another type of analysis that we, or another type of output that the NLRD, that we can get from the NLRD is an analysis that we've just recently been working on, and they're learning pathways. These kind of analyses provide a snapshot of the movement that learners take as they navigate our NQF through the levels or through the sub-frameworks. This particular slide shows the learning pathways that we have between 1995 and 2014, the top 30 learning pathways. And I think what's interesting is we just see the different movements and note how people move from either higher to lower or lower to higher or across sub-frameworks within the NQF. And the numbers within these are just the actual number of learners that are making these movements. So this is something that we are currently expanding on. I'd like to just briefly touch on the highlights, challenges, and then I'll hand back over to Julie for the lessons learned. But I would like to talk on the key highlights that we've been able to accomplish with the NLRD. As part of our highlights, we've been able to track progress made in implementing recognition of prior learning in South Africa. I mean, the data that we have in terms of professional bodies and providers has helped us understand our RPL value chain better. SAQA has, like I mentioned in the previous slide, also been able to conduct learning pathway analysis for 3 sectors in South Africa. Those sectors are the early childhood development, community development, and engineering sectors. An example of, one of the findings or some of the findings that we have is seen in this little image here. On the left-hand side, we've got the learning pathways as the experts in that sector, and this is for early childhood development. This is the learning pathways as they have outlined. If learners were to navigate the NQF, it should look like this. However, when we look at the information on the NLRD, what we find is a different, kind of pattern coming through. We've shared some of these findings at various workshops and engaged with the key stakeholders and key players in these spaces, and we know that there are opportunities to take this forward. We've also conducted international benchmarking analysis for the South African development community, SADC, over the last 4 years by contributing to and generating a mobility report, which helps us understand the mobility of learners within the SADC region. What you see on the screen here is an example of one of the contents of such reports. In addition, the information on the NLRD, with what we have and with the experience that we have given lessons learned, and we've been able to pass on some of these lessons to other countries who we have helped in conceptualizing similar systems. A case in point is Namibia, who we recently supporting by helping them develop specification requirements for their NQF MIS. I think it's important to note here that, of course, while engaging with different countries we've supported, we take some lessons away ourselves, which we use to further enhance our own systems. What are some of our other highlights? Although this slide summarizes everything that I've spoken about, I'd like to just add 1 or 2 things. The information on the NLRD has also helped government entities with projects such as helping to determine the scarce skills, the number of scarce skills in the country. And we know that students and universities also have approached us to use that information for further research purposes. Some of the challenges that we've experienced, in developing our systems, I think the very first one is our historical data gaps. With the previous, with our history, I'd like to say, there were fragmented record keeping that existed prior to the existence of the NQF. So currently we still have paper records that are stored and records that are stored in other formats that are not digital that need to find their way to the MIS. Till date, SAQA has digitized about 1 million of these, but we are constantly looking for opportunities to continue with digitization initiatives to further enrich the NLRD. I mean, the more records that we have, then the more we are able to paint a complete picture of, the learner and what's going on with the NQF. Another challenge that we have is we've often encountered structural or occasional delays with data submissions, even though there are timelines for the information to be submitted to the NLRD. With these delays, we are sometimes unable to provide timely verification of qualification and to provide our services in time. To address this, SAQA is in the process of gazetting data regulations that will provide strict criteria for timely data submission. Finally, there are other registers that are currently not fully integrated into the MIS. To address this, we have introduced integration projects, and we're constantly looking for opportunities to further enrich and improve this MIS. One of our key priorities, like Julie has mentioned, is to make that shift from focusing on the NLRD brand and move towards establishing a more holistic NQF MIS. I think that's it from me. I'd like to hand over back to Julie to just take the last slide and round up this presentation. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Tola. I'm very mindful of the time, Eduardo. So very quickly, as I mentioned earlier, I think when I started this presentation, what we have learned is that an MIS system needs to take context into account. So we believe it must be guided and informed by the information needs of a specific context or country and the system to which it is linked and unified. In South Africa, we have a system of collaboration with our key NQF partners, and that includes 3 quality councils and the departments of basic education and higher education. So while instruments and approaches are what we have learned, they are transferable across countries, the policies and systems not necessarily so. And because they're, as was said by the first opening speaker, they are culturally and socially embedded. And so it requires a contextual understanding of what is needed. Management information systems are not static. They are constantly being improved and enhanced, and the digital, revolution is taken into consideration. So we consider it a multi-year process informed by continuous improvements and enhancements. And we are definitely seeing that we need to shift from procedural data loading to more strategic use of the data to inform strategy and planning on our national imperatives for the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Julie Reddy and Tola, for this very insightful and well thought through presentation, and for contextualizing in terms of the history of the National Qualifications Framework and South Africa, the Management Information System, so the NLRD, and for reminding that you seek now a new avenue and you are looking towards a more strategic use of data. I think this is a very fundamental conclusion of yours, a strategic use of data. In fact, indeed, we are in the era of data. Data is the new energy, the new, let's say, I would not say oil anymore, because oil is already the past, but it's the new gold. And thank you so much for underscoring this aspect, strategic use of data. Thanks a lot. And as you can see from the movements and exchanges in the chat box, many countries are really interested in exactly this aspect, management information system, strategic use of data related with qualifications and qualifications framework. And now we move a little bit further to the east now, to Kenya. And Dr. Eusebius Mukwana and Dr. Vincent Kuech will share with us the very new experience of the Kenyan National Qualifications Authority with NQFs. And I think we will have a very interesting presentation about quite interesting novelties and the use of very modern technologies. Thank you very much. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. I hope, confirm you can be able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see and we can hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Correct. I will take the first stage of making the presentation. I just want to take you through the NAKIMS, which is the system you have already mentioned. But first, KNQA was established Kenya National under the Kenya National Qualifications Framework Act number 22 of 2014. The mandate of the authority is to establish and maintain the Kenya National Qualifications Framework. The system that we are using to maintain our framework, our Nqf MIS, is what we are calling the National Qualifications Information Management Systems, which is in short mentioned as NAKIMS. NAKIMS is a system for registering qualifications, awarding institutions. We also use the same system to register qualifications as well as management of learners' records. The architecture of this system is based on distributed ledger technology, popularly known as blockchain. KNQA has leveraged on blockchain technology to create a central repository of all qualifications in Kenya, hence making qualifications management to be seamless. The objective of this Nqf MIS called NAKIMS is to register all the qualification awarding institutions. And by so doing, we also accredit the same institutions. After registering these qualifications awarding institutions, we also register their respective qualifications, and we use the same system to also upload the learners' records into the Kenya National Learners' Records database. As you can see on the screen is a representation of the stakeholders that are contributing to the Kenya National Qualifications Framework. We have the universities, TVET institutions, professional bodies, and other mandated institutions that are allowed to issue qualifications. These stakeholders are the ones that are acting as our data sources for our Kenya National Learners' Records database. The architecture of the system that we have mentioned, which is the NAKIMS, is as you can see on the screen. On the previous screen, we just looked at the stakeholders. We have just tried to bring all these stakeholders on board using a single architecture. So in that architecture, we have examination bodies, TVET institutions, the CUE, SCAC, policymakers, KNQA itself, the universities, students, and TVET institutions. As we mentioned earlier on, we have embraced or we have leveraged on blockchain technology to get to be able to achieve seamless transfer of information between the different stakeholders using this architecture. NAKIMS, or the Nqf MIS, was brought in board to give us solutions to some inherent problems that we have been facing in the past. And these problems was centering on the general public, the country as a whole, qualifications awarding institutions, and also the various government education agencies that manage qualifications in this country. I won't go into the details of those challenges, but as you can see, I've included on the presentation that will be shared later on. I just want to make an illustration of how the stakeholders benefit from this NAKIMS system. Through the system, we analyze information, we do a lot of analysis, and we provide the same information to education stakeholders. This analysis is normally in line with the qualification trends. which is also shared to potential employment agencies, policymakers. It has created a lot of efficiency and effectiveness in terms of the management of these qualifications, and it creates trust and transparency. It is also good to mention at this point that we have integrated this system called NQFs with other education management systems like RPL, the Kenya Credit Accumulation and Transfer System, the National Recognition, Equation and Verification System, and various integrations are also ongoing so that we can have the information in the Kenya National Learners Records database shared with other systems across board. There's a diagram on the screen there, which is just an illustration of how we used to do operations manually on the left side of the screen. On the right side of the screen, we have introduced the blockchain technology. The major difference between the two is that on the left side, we used to rely on printed documents in terms of qualifications, and it used to create a lot of chaos when it comes to the management of qualification in our country. But on the right side, we are introducing the digital format of doing it. And as you can see, qualifications awarding institutions are interlinked together through a seamless transfer of information using the various application programming interfaces. These APIs are the ones that will enables transfer of information from QAIs to the Kenya National Qualifications Authority. And in this manner, we can be able to manage the various qualifications awarding institutions together with their qualifications, as well as the learners' records. This is just an access guide of what happens in the NQF system, starting from the point where institutions make a formal request to KNQA so that they can be onboarded in the system by creating accounts. A verification link is normally sent to the QAIs. When after the verification of the accounts have been done, we normally create an account using the NQF system so that the various QAIs or qualifications awarding institutions can be able to apply for registration or accreditation. And from there, they can also be able to bring on board their qualifications as well as their learners. This is just the same diagram illustrated in a more broad perspective. Again, I won't go into the details of that. So as I mentioned earlier on, we accredit qualifications awarding institutions. Thereafter, we register the various qualifications at different levels. Again, the registration of qualifications at different levels has been illustrated by the steps on the presentation there. Again, I won't go into the details. After the registration of qualifications, we now bring on board the learners into the system to what we are calling the Kenya National Learners Records Database. And as I mentioned earlier on, this has been achieved by interconnecting the various QAIs using the various APIs. These qualification awarding institutions upload their data directly into the KNLRD, or the Kenya National Learners Records Database. On the browser, they can be able to log into NQFs. And upon logging into the NQFs, they can be able to go through the registration process. We have two options of doing it. Using the APIs, information can be onboarded through the NQF systems directly, or it can be done by uploading using in an Excel format, using a predefined template. After this information has been put in the NQF system, the outside world can be able to verify the qualifications by just creating by just registering to the NACIM system. And after registration, they can be able to get a link through their email so that they can be able to log into the NACIM system and verify the various qualifications. Some of the challenges that we have had so far, just like my former colleague has just presented for South Africa, we have an issue to do with the volume of data. As Eduardo has mentioned, this system is quite young. We just rolled it out this year. We are in the process of registering qualifications awarding institutions as well as the various qualifications. Our database is quite young. We expect it to grow over time. For now, because of the volume of data that we have, it is not sufficient enough. We have not guaranteed a good payload capacity in terms of the capacity or the volume of the data that we have. But as it matures, it will be able to grow and we can be able to capture as many qualifications as possible moving forward. There is an issue to do with validation and verification of records. Just by ensuring that mechanisms have been put in place in the design of the system, such that when you are uploading the learner's records, the system has a mechanism of checking whether the information is valid. And also, it is the responsibility of the qualification awarding institutions to ensure that the information they upload into the Kenya National Learners Records database meets the required standards. The third challenge is the aspect of integrity, just ensuring that the information provided is exact. And we have to cater for this. Blockchain technology has assisted us a lot by ensuring that the exact copy of information that the QAIs have is the exact information that is contained in the Kenya National Learners Records database. So in a nutshell, we are seeing the management of qualifications in our country to be NACIMS as the solution to all the problems that we have mentioned earlier on. And that is why in most cases, we normally talk of the backstops at NACIMS when it comes to the management of qualifications in our country. So up to that point, I want to submit. If the Director General or the CEO is on board, he can be able to make some few comments. Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you, Asante Sana. Thank you very much for this presentation. As we expected, it's of course a little bit of a new world. And we can see that national qualifications frameworks and systems are changing. It looks like there is a very strong multidisciplinarity that is needed to innovate and to make these systems operational. Now we are talking already about data science, data analytics, blockchain technologies. So I think it's a little bit of a new world opening. And if national qualifications frameworks are catching up and are able to join this multidisciplinarity and the world of data science, maybe there are indeed a number of issues that can be addressed differently from now on. And thank you so much for sharing the details on how the system, the NACIMS is being built, and also the challenges related with data volume, data validation and verification, data integrity. Thank you so much. I'd like also, of course, to ask Dr. Mukwana, would you have some comments or some suggestions, some insightful remarks from your CEO view?
Nothing to add, just to say that we found ourselves in a very complicated system where we had nearly 3,000 institutions keeping databases of learners and qualifications in their system. And this is what we have been doing for a very long time. So what we are trying to do is to bring all this information into one system. As you can imagine, it exists in different formats. Because of the way we joke around is in Kenya, the mother was born after the babies were already born. So the qualification framework came in when we have very mature universities and everything like that. So we are always seen as a baby, and so it requires a lot of talking, a lot of sweet talking sometimes. So not everybody is happy because some people want to be very protective about their roles, but we keep talking. So far we've managed quite a bit, and as I indicated in my earlier remarks, when we were developing the system, we expected a lot of resistance. Luckily, we have a lot of institutions queuing up. Every month, we are registering nearly 500, 600 new qualifications. So the support is there. We also have a lot of support from the highest levels of government, and that has really supported our work. So we see that although this is work in progress, one of the lessons to take away is having the political government support is very, very important for us. So we have a lot of institutions queuing. And part of the challenge is all the information that you have must be put in the same, as Koech was saying, it must be put in the same structure before it to be uploaded into the system. So it takes a bit of time. It's a lot of work for universities, especially some of them are very old, 50 years, but we are working with them, and we are happy with the progress that we are making. Let me leave it there, Eduardo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mukwana. I'd like to just remind participants that you can use the chat box to write down your questions, and we will have like 15 minutes in the end to try to address at least some of the questions. Thank you very much. Of course, again, these presentations are already available, uploaded and accessible in the web page of this webinar. You can simply go and download them. And now we move to another session, the last substantive session of this very interesting, I would say, webinar. And we are going to discuss with Miriam and Madalena. So they are going to tell us their views and experiences also regarding recognition and verification of qualifications. So Miriam will be our first speaker. And I think she has a very interesting approach about networking. And this will be a very interesting perspective. Miriam, you are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Eduardo, and good afternoon, colleagues. And just to say thank you so much on behalf of the Aqvn for having given us this opportunity. I think it's always a pleasure when we have to share what we've done before and hopefully what we'll be doing in the future. Just to give a bit of some background, but some perspective, we're basically going to be talking about the Africa Qualifications Verification Network. And this network basically deals with issues of verifications insofar as they affect recognition of qualifications in Africa. And we take cognizance of the fact that qualifications in Africa are linked with, they are not in isolation, they link the world. And you can see from these diagrams that we bring different skills. All of us that's in the qualification sector, we basically have different skills that we offer, and they cut across the rest of the world. And luckily, or unluckily for those that do not have genuine qualifications, they're a gateway to a number of countries. With these qualifications, we can move, we can cross borders. And However, we need to have a basis on which we can cross borders. There has to be recognition. Otherwise, as the first speaker mentioned, there's no point in having a qualification if you cannot use it. If you cannot, it cannot be recognized. There's no point in getting a job in Nigeria if you cannot use, if your qualification cannot be recognized. And in the context of Africa, we have diverse ethnic borders. We have different homelands. Some of the borders are their national borders, but really the people are the same. So people can easily crisscross. However, are their qualifications recognized? And these are some of the issues as national qualifications agencies and QAs we have to deal with. How do we do that? That's how we come, each one of us. We've heard the qualification, the presentations from SAQA, from Kenya. Basically, we are dealing in a space of having qualifications that we have to manage properly, ensure recognition, so that our governments can make proper decisions. So this is at the national level. However, for that data, when we are talking of, SAQA did make in their presentation, they have a database of foreign qualifications. How do they ensure that recognition is happening properly? Because they have to confirm from the next country whether this person who is bringing this qualification has genuine qualifications. How do we do that? And we do that from what we have come together as an African, team of qualification agencies and other agencies involved in recognition of qualifications. We have formed an African Qualifications Verification Network with a vision that we are a hub of genuine qualifications across Africa. Our mission, colleagues, some of you are our members, but our vision is really to develop a trustworthy and legitimate institutional linkage and network across the African continent. A number of us in here are involved in verifying qualifications, ensuring that what we have is genuine. SAQA's example has given that now the Act has been amended to have a register for misrepresented qualifications as well as fraudulent qualifications. How will they ensure that that happens if we do not collaborate across nations to give each other information? So just a bit more background. As you can see, our membership involves all those that are involved in recognition and verification of qualifications. We've had 26 different countries and institutions that have been represented with engagements with SADC. SADC has been our support. This initiative basically started in 2016 through SAQA's initiative, bringing agencies together because we have faced the same problem. We are looking to verify qualifications, we cannot get information. We don't trust each other's quality assurance systems. How do we overcome that? And that was basically how a communique was agreed, and we signed a declaration and have been working since then. And we are supported, and we basically engage with different institutions, and gladly ETF is one of our partners, and we continue to do work with them. Basically, why the Aqvn, I have in some cases, in some bits already alluded to that. We have seen a growing trend of fraudulent qualifications. We hear of diploma and accreditation mills. We hear some of our colleagues, some of our countries, our national qualifications authorities are being sued because they've not recognized a particular qualification. How do they manage to get over that, to ensure that they can actually prove that this qualification is actually not genuine? It hasn't gone through the relevant qualification, relevant process of getting a qualification. So all of us have faced this. And as Aqvn, we said, this is really the basis on which we needed to come together. There was also, it still exists. we have seen that there's missing information on country-specific education systems. Before we had the Aqvn and our engagements, it was very difficult, for instance, for us as Zambia, I'll give an example, to get information out of Nigeria. It was almost impossible. But we unlocked that through this network. We are able to get some verifications done. We're not 100% there, but this has been very helpful. So if we come together, then these gaps basically are taken care of. And you find delays in confirmation of qualification status. You'll find Kenya, they have a system, it's working. You write to them because of not really appreciating the person on the other end, not having this relationship, it would sometimes take long. I'm not saying this is what happens with Kenya, I'm just giving an example. So basically, now that we are part of a network and we have communication channels, it becomes easy. We can reach out to each other much, much better. And basically, having seen all this, what has happened? We've now built a trust hub. And verification of qualifications, recognition of qualification is all about trust. I need to trust your education system. I need to trust your framework. I need to trust what you do in your country for me to say, oh yes, if Ghana has said this is genuine, yes, I'm happy it is genuine. So I need to know your system. So information sharing and experience sharing, very, very key. Institutional support, we support each other. You find like this same platform you have seen from the chats that we've had, people are asking for extra information and so on, and that becomes a capacity building. And through this network, I will tell you that some countries, Zambia, Namibia, I think South Africa gave an example, we have been supported by, in terms of developing our qualifications information systems, because we've learned what others are doing. And instead of doing over what they've done, we've just jumped some steps. So this concept of working together is what the Aqvn basically has been promoting. And as we are doing that, we do look at a number of considerations. What is the education system that is there? So we share information on that. The diversity, Julie did mention that, you have to contextualize your Nqf. These are the things that we look at when we are discussing with another country. We look at what is different about their education system, but you cannot do that if you do not have the information. And that's how the Aqvn basically helps with that support. One of the things that we always have are the issues of language and language barrier. We don't understand each other. So because we are Francophone, we will not really collaborate very well with the Anglophone. And so with the Aqvn, we try to bridge that gap. I'm glad that I can actually see my colleague, Abdul, from Senegal. He speaks French, I speak English, but somehow we communicate and we manage to get certain things done. And it's in that collaboration that we can actually ensure that as we are building the ACQF, issues of language will not be a big issue because, as you have seen today, the translations have been done. So this also recognizes the technical expertise that we have in our different spaces that we have. Financing, it will not be the same everywhere, but together we can at least open up sources. ETF, AU, our regional bodies that we belong to, this becomes now a basis on which we can advocate for more funding to issues of recognition of qualifications and so on. And of course, one of the key issues also is to stamp out fraud, which I think is something that we are also concerned about. Obviously, I've indicated that in summary, but where are we as a country? We look at that, where do we want to go? And through the network, we are able to see where our friends have been. Like today, I've seen how far SACO has gone, so far. I could use that experience. And this platform then gives me that possibility to speak with Julie and ask her what kind of support, even technical support. I'm sure that is something that would easily be managed through that. Same as Kenya. Kenya is as young as we are. We're probably a little bit 2 years older, but at the end of the day, we're facing the same issues. So it becomes easy for us to basically work together. And this basically also should bring together issues of coordination and fragmentation. There's too many of us here and there dealing with issues of, qualifications, trusting each other, and so on. So some of these initiatives need to be brought together. But how do we do that? It's starting with small steps with institutions like these networks. We can be talking of 26 countries with 30 institutions represented, but hey, there's a lot of African countries. And what basically does is that we know that there are conventions that are in place, but how effective are they? How are we actually using them? And it is forums like the Aqvn that help us come together and have a common voice and also start pushing towards ensuring implementation. Because there's no point if SAQA has signed the revised convention on Addis and Zambia has not. How do we collaborate? How do we speak on the same space? We can't. But if we sit together, appreciate this convention, implementation becomes easy. And then we can open issues of, ensuring seamless linkage of our quality assurance systems, our frameworks. We learn from each other and we build the trust that we need. So basically, those are all, issues, country-specific issues. Obviously, we'll go into details. You are able to see the issues that each country has to deal with, but eventually also the region has to look at what now as a regional side, what are the issues? Because when you're in SADC, there's a SADC qualifications framework. East Africa has a East Africa qualifications framework. How do they speak to each other? And eventually, how do they speak to the continental framework? So all these are issues that we need to basically look at. And these are issues that we actually discussed. The last meeting that we had for the Aqvn, we invited Aqvn to speak. We invited SADC. And like that, it does help us better align our qualifications frameworks, because then we are not living outside what we are all expected. And really lastly, just to sum it all, where is the role of Aqvn? As we've said, we share experiences in what we do. We give an advisory role based on our country experience, as well as institutional experience and regional experience as well. But more importantly, we create a trust hub, because one of the components of the ACQF is the issue of recognition of qualifications, verifications, ensuring that the qualifications that are there are trusted. So basically, we create that, and then we support each other as institutions in qualifications management. Others, as indicated, Cape Verde, South Africa, Mauritius are so many years ahead. Some of us are in between, the others are way down, but together we can pull each other up. And of course, streamlining and aligning existing networks for us to better serve each other in issues of qualifications management. So really, in a nutshell, that is something that we can achieve as working together as African institutions involved in qualifications management. And together, the ACQF is a reality. We've already seen, today is our 10th webinar. I do know that we've shared quite a lot, and implementation is the next step. Thank you so much. Obrigada and asante sana.
Thank you very much, Miriam. It was really brilliant. Thank you so much for all this spirit of coming together. But we also have some questions in our presentation, as we did in the previous webinar. So some questions that we have prepared towards our speakers. And so One question to Olavo. Olavo, in 2 minutes, if you could give us your main points, your lessons learned, let's say. What is the actual added value of a national qualifications framework in the context of the national qualifications system, the wider context? So how do NQFs contribute as change agents? What can you tell us about this? What, for all the countries that are now starting or going towards a consolidation of some initial work already done, dialogue and analysis, etc., towards developing an NQF. So what is the added value from your experience? What are those 2 or 3 or more elements that really represent this kind of a bit revolutionary, if you want, aspects of NQFs? O valor acrescentado dos quadros nacionais de qualificação. Portanto, não dentro do sistema. Por que que o quadro de nacionais...
The NQFs, not within the system. So why the NQF is important as an agent of change?
Maybe, Olavo, you have your... Olavo, do you have your sound on?
Som não. Desculpa, não tinha visto que tinha o microfone desligado.
I didn't know that I'd muted my microphone. Eduardo, I was saying that your question is wise and smart. If you allow me, I'd like to add this question to respond to the question from Ismael Funda that states that what should be done for qualifications to gain transparency and legitimacy by the lawmakers. Those are the same questions, but answered differently. So when we talk about national qualification framework, we're establishing certain parameters. The national qualification framework determines the levels of qualifications that exist. So this is an important benchmark because the companies, the employers and employees, and the people that want to acknowledge their competences know that there is a benchmark whereby qualifications can be measured and defined. So definitely, this is very important. The countries, by having the NQFs, can have a parameter that allows them to compare national qualifications with qualifications from other countries. The major problem, as we heard from Dr. Maria Gil, about the bachelor's degree. In some countries, we have this degree, in others we don't. What we find some difficulty for those managing the NQF when they want to give an equivalence of the qualification. So the framework is really important. The other point is that the NQF can also work as an important element to the strategic decision-making process.
Podem perfeitamente, de acordo com os quadros, traçarem determinadas.
It can create certain strategies that they want to achieve. For example, a certain country can decide that if, for example, in an NQF, in my country for a period of 5 to 10 years, I can have a stock of human resources that have a certain qualification, numbers 5, 7, or 8, levels 5, 7, or 8. Then countries can develop policies to achieve those goals. There is a third aspect, which is very important, and it's an added value to the framework, in the sense that the framework enables the framework of qualifications, but this is also very important when we are promoting the mobility of people. As I've said, and a few days it happened, the CPLP, that's Portuguese-speaking countries conference in terms of the movement space at the level of the CPLP. And there is something that only us technicians can understand. When we talk about mobility, cannot occur without we don't have coordination. We cannot have peaceful mobility if a nurse from a certain country moves from one country to another, cannot have his or her qualifications recognized. So what we need is to have harmonized NQFs. It's true that we will not have the same NQFs for all countries. Even regional countries, regional NQFs do not. Regional qualification frameworks are different. So what we can do is to have our own NQFs, but take into account the region or the country that we are in and try to align to the framework of neighboring country or region. So in this sense, mobility makes sense. Otherwise, we consider mobility as a dead book.
For your very comprehensive views and shared about this question, what is the added value of the NQF?
Sorry, Eduarda. 30 seconds. Ishmael Vunda, about the legitimacy by the employers. We need to see how qualifications are done, how qualifications are recognized, and who recognizes and establishes those qualifications. So legitimacy has to do with the credibility. So if qualification is done in partnership with the employers, and this is a qualification that has necessary credibility, this can be acknowledged by the employers, otherwise it will not be recognized. So the world of qualifications is a world of dialogue, and in this dialogue, we need to be part of it. Otherwise, the main receivers, if I can say, of the product of qualifications. The companies need competent. They are the right ones to say how we can train competent people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This reflection, additional reflection. Thanks a lot, Olaf. To our colleagues, of course, South Africa and Kenya especially, who have been sharing this very brilliant information about all the developments and new perspectives related with management information systems of national qualifications frameworks and qualifications. We have a couple of questions as well. And so the first question, for example, we heard very well from SAQA about the kind of data analytics that can be done on the basis of the existing system, of the existing database and register of qualifications. Maybe we could ask Dr. Mukwana as well as Dr. Kuch if they could tell us a little bit more about this kind of data analytics. And if you don't mind, we have another question. It's about interoperability. I think we have seen also from the discussions today that countries, of course, have data. We even heard now from Madalena Gil that there is a lot of data, but how to treat it all? So this notion of interoperability of data systems, of databases is important. And can you tell us a little bit more, SAQA and the Kenyan National Qualifications Authority, about how your NQF, let's say, management information systems are interoperable with, for example, data systems of employment services or online job vacancy portals, or also even with statistical data on labor market, jobs and skills demand. Is this something that is in part of your strategy, of your data development strategy? Then another question is, we know that South Africa and other countries in the SADC region are already developing interesting initiatives related with digital certificates. And so the question here very, very simply is whether your NQF management information system, whatever the name, includes this kind of infrastructure for issuance of digital certificates. And then, of course, to what extent the NQF management information system allows for wider and very open dissemination of information, but of course, readable information, intelligence for end users, such as inventory of all qualification study and career guidance possibilities, etc. We have seen this very brilliant, I always considered it really brilliant, picture of the pathways based on the LRD, so the top 30 learning pathways. And this is probably one of these interesting ways of looking at career somehow. But do you have something a bit more specific, more granular related with career possibilities, progression, or any other uses for the end users? So these are a couple of questions, and you can pick those that better fit your case and where you feel you can add value to this conversation. And then we will conclude our webinar with just 1 or 2 minutes of information on next steps. Thank you. Who would like to start? Kenya or South Africa? Thank you in advance. You can unmute yourselves and whatever you would like to share with us.
Eduardo, if you don't mind, it's Julie ready. I will start. And if you will just let me answer James' 2 questions that was in the chat. I didn't respond there because I thought I would respond now. And then I'll get to your questions very, very quickly. Okay. I think James asked is how different is the process of registering professional designations on the NQF to that of qualifications. Mm-hmm. I think what we learned is we thought we could register professional designations licensed to practice on the NQF against as qualifications, but we learned very quickly that designations are not qualifications. They actually titles that are, earned post a qualification. So they might have underlying qualifications against them, but they're not necessarily a qualification. And because the NQF in South Africa is a register for now of national qualifications, we couldn't register the professional designations on the NQF. So we've registered against qualifications on the NQF. And I'll give you a quick example. I think it's important. A doctor is a title, a medical doctor. It's not a qualification as a PhD. The person will get a qualification at NQF level 9, which is equivalent to a master's degree. So we had to separate that. All right, I'll stop there. And then the delayed submissions, there's all kinds of reasons because the quality councils tell us that they can't load the data because they are dependent on the providers for giving them the data, the people who get the data, like the higher education institutions, etc. Also, they have to quality assure the data. But we also have a problem. Data is an income source. So a lot of people earn data by using it as a verification tool or to issue certificates. People pay for reissuing of certificates, etc. So it has become a very guarded, you use the word gold. Well, for a lot of it, there are vested interests and people earn money for it. So suddenly they feel very compromised that they have to give it to SAQA, and SAQA charges a fee of verifying qualifications, both, you know, on a national, on a foreign basis, of certificates that they issue as institutions or are in charge of quality assurance. It's a political issue that we are trying to grapple with, because at the end of the day, the achievement data belongs to the learner, and it should be made available to the learner when and if they need it. So, you know, it is an issue we're dealing with. You asked about the interoperability of data. I mean, as I said, we were kind of very narrow focused and internally focused in South Africa and SAQA by just focusing on loading data and only focusing on achievement data, which we use for various purposes. We use it for supply and demand, you know, some kind of planning, not optimally, because our Department of Labor and other entities, we are not the first point of call, but that is a SAQA problem because we haven't publicized this data very widely. And now we are on a mission to proactively do it and show how data could be so useful in planning, in dealing with these issues, their skills, matching achievement to career options, etc. So we are moving into that space where we're shifting to more strategic data analytics, and we think that will, you know, eventually result in a groundswell of people approaching us to actually make meaning of the data and use it for, you know, various strategic purposes. We already have started with electronic certificates. Our foreign qualification evaluation certificate, we now have an electronic certificate of evaluation, which we issue in real time. And people can, you know, get it online. And any employer also can, you know, be able to access it and see it in real time that it is a genuine certificate from SAQA. We're hoping to make that much more widespread. In terms of the use of careers, one of the things SAQA did is based on a proposal it did, it got funding from our Department of Higher Education to set up a career services organization. And I think you raise a very important part, Eduardo, an aspect of NQFs, that NQFs are relational instruments, that you cannot separate qualifications from career pathing and assisting learners. And one of the things we developed a few years ago is an Nqf Career Portal. Using the information in our database, a learner could go in, write a resume or a CV, and say they wanted to study, for example, architecture. We would show them using GPS where the nearest institution was, what are the various learning pathways they can, you know, there's not only one way to get into this kind of profession, how they would go about doing it, what are the admission requirements, the applications, etc., etc. Unfortunately, that project has been stalled a little bit and has never gained traction. But I think we then mapped out about over 1,000 learning pathways into careers. And it was a very, you know, I thought value-adding exercise, which we hope to revisit and bring on board. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Julie Reddy. It was really, particularly the last response was very future also oriented, and probably at continental level, maybe related also with the future ACQF. There could be ways to develop for example, these relational possibilities related with study, career, progression, guidance, adjacency of skills and competences, helping people in their lifelong learning, lifelong working and learning pathways. Thank you. I don't know if our colleagues from Kenya also would like to add. I'm sure they have very interesting contributions on some of these questions or all of them. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. This is Vincent from KNQA.
Yep.
I wish to point out that at KNQA, we are employing the various tools and techniques to carry out our analytics. So far, the analytics we have done is pointing out on the various trends in our qualifications. There's also an issue of frequencies. It has also helped us to identify the various gray areas as far as qualifications are concerned. And it has enabled us to cite various sections that we have identified that needs to, that points out the various call to action areas as far as our qualifications are concerned. We have also aggregated various analytic tools that has enabled us to share various dashboards with different team members, as well as creating visualizations that can help us to interpret those analytics. The cloud storage that we are using also allows us to carry out analytics in terms of storage and retrieval of large data sets of information. NACMIS helps to interoperationalization of various systems. So far, using the application programming interfaces, we have integrated NACMIS with various qualification awarding institutions to help in sharing information, and plans are underway to integrate with other government entities like employment services, online job organizations, labor markets, and so on and so forth. In terms of digital certificates, plans are underway for NACMIS to undergo a major upgrade that will bring on board additional blockchain technology features and functionalities, including the issue of digital certificates. For dissemination of information about NLRD is normally shared across the various education stakeholders, as well as the policymakers. I think that is it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, Vincent, for this also very detailed information and responses. I think there is a whole new area of sharing that we are discovering here today with your two cases, South Africa and Kenya. And this is absolutely fundamental and very, very strategic. So this raises as at two levels higher the strategic importance of national qualifications frameworks within the system, and the novelties and of data science, and can really help very much. And I think certainly across the continent, the 55 countries or the regions speaking with each other and benefiting from all the potentialities of new new computer science and data science. Thanks a lot. I think we should really try to continue this conversation about NQF management information systems as they look like now and in the future. Maybe from Africa there will be something revolutionary for the world. Let's see. I think there is a very interesting potential in what we see here today as experiences. So colleagues, I want to thank you. We want to thank you very much, all of you, for participating, for being active, for asking questions. And I'd like just to mention that we had today participants from over 25 countries. I would like to name the countries because it's really very, very impressive. So we had Angola, Burundi, Cape Verde, Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Togo, Mozambique, Mauritius, Seychelles, Morocco, Tunisia. We also had Senegal and other countries from other continents, Bahrain, Ukraine, and France. So thank you so much for your participation. Maybe I did not mention some countries that have been present here today. Apologies. If you want to add your country to the list I just named, please do it, colleagues. It will be a pleasure. I simply, of course, don't know everybody present. Thank you. If you don't mind, I wanted then to just to say that today we spoke, we discussed and we underlined the importance of trust, that everything we are doing together and the ACQF, the future ACQF, is about creating and improving trust. It's about dialogue. It's about learning from each other. It's about, let's say, the strategic use of all these instruments and data, for example. It's about an ecosystem view where things are interconnected. Work, learning, education, training, it's all part of one ecosystem. And of course, it is all for the integrated Africa, the Africa we want. Then a few announcements, if you don't mind, very, very quickly. Our next peer learning webinar, number 11, will be on the 23rd of September. And then the 12th will be on 28th of October. So we will have very interesting topics as well. We will have, for example, the relationship between national qualifications frameworks and TVET reforms. We will have the school curriculum survey, African school curriculum survey, the presentation of findings, recommendations. We will have also a discussion on AFCFTA, so the African Continental Free Trade Area, and ACQF, which synergies can be put together. And there's always a final experts panel. We will, of course, speak about learning outcomes, about level descriptors, towards level descriptors of the ACQF, also ACQF guidelines on quality assurance, and other ACQF guidelines that are going now to be started very soon. The elaboration will be started very soon. There will be also a 5 days training workshop. Probably it has to be online given the situation. It is planned for early December. We will be back to you, all of you colleagues, with more information and ask you to send us names of candidates, people, persons of various institutions who might be interested to participate in this training workshop. There will be also an ACQF conference in December. The ACQF website is now going towards a higher level. So the first phase has been concluded, and we are starting now a new phase towards a higher quality website. There will be also a learning management system to support all these capacity development and sharing activities. Our colleague Miriam had to leave. She was busy in other activities, of course, but I just want to say that Aqvn is organizing a webinar, a specific Aqvn webinar next week, 27th of July. And Miriam has already sent the invitations. If any of you would like to participate, please, you could write your name in the chat box, and I will ask if Miriam would be sending you the invitations for this very interesting webinar. And of course, the capacity, the activities, the ACQF development activities go on, they continue. And next week on 28th, there will be the 3rd ACQF advisory group meeting that is going then to deliberate, to discuss and deliberate on a very important set of topics for the way forward. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, all speakers, for the very brilliant and presentations, knowledge, and all the generous sharing that we have in this community. It is a unique way of learning from each other. Thanks a lot, and stay safe, stay well, all of you. And please visit the webpage. All the presentations are there. And also please visit the YouTube channel all the video recordings are also available for when you have a moment to look closer at some of the presentations that you would like to repeat or to see again, etc. Thank you so much. So we meet again next week with some of you, or then in September. Thank you, colleagues. If you don't mind, maybe could we all open our cameras and we take a picture as we